Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Germany once again, and we're going to continue on with this little mini-series of German reviews that I've been doing for you over the last few videos. Now, for this review, we are going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. These guys seem to be very well established and very well respected in their local area, and they're from a region that is very famous for its beer, in fact, and it's one of my favourite places in Germany, I have to say. But the beer itself is a style that I very much enjoy, one that's right up my street, probably my favourite style of German beer, come to think of it, but it's one that we don't get to review all that many examples of on the channel. And when I saw that one of the good German beer retailers here in Scotland had a bunch of these on the internet, I thought, you know, I have to order these and have a little look at them. So yeah, this should be a really interesting one. Needless to say, I'm very curious to see what it's going to have in store for us. So hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to the Franken region, which is in the northern part of Bavaria, Bayern. Kind of almost in central Germany, I guess you could say, regarding where it is. But we're going to go to the little village of Weissenohe in the Forchheim district to the northeast of Nuremberg, and we're going to have a look then at my first beer from Klosterbrauerei Weissenohe, or the monastic brewery or monastery brewery of Weissenohe. But this one is called the Bonator. It comes in at 8% ABV, and as you may be able to tell from the name, if you're really clued up on your German, this one is a Doppelbock. So yeah, this should be very nice actually. It's supposed to be a very nice example of the Doppelbock style, and as I've mentioned to you on the channel before, this is probably my favourite German beer style, other than the Rauch beers, I guess we could say. So yeah, always cool to introduce new German breweries to you here on the channel, and always nice to get the chance to review a good Doppelbock. So yeah, we'll crack on with this one then and see what it has in store. As always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I'll do in the future, hopefully, from Klosterbrauerei Weissenohe. Very first time I'm trying one of the beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated. And remember, you can go into the channel homepage as well and search for beer using the geography tagging system. So just go in there, use the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the German playlist, along with a number of other things. That's being added to quite regularly at the moment, and you can check out the playlists of beers from other countries as well. So yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Klosterbrauerei Weissenohe. And I will apologise in advance for any bad German pronunciations in this video, but I'll try my best. So anyway, Klosterbrauerei Weissenohe is based in the small village of Weissenohe in the Forchheim district, which is to the northeast of Nuremberg in Franken, in the northern part of Bavaria in Germany. So Bavaria is technically southern Germany, but if you look at where this place is, it's almost like central eastern Germany, if we can call it that. But the brewery is attached to the local monastery, hence the name Klosterbrauerei, and this was founded in the latter half of the 11th century, and it was confirmed by Pope Paschalis II in the year 1109, and it was dedicated to Saint Bonifacius. But it's believed that the monastery was founded by Aribo II, who was the former Count Palatinate of Bavaria. But due to its geographic location, the monastery belonged to the Upper Palatinate for nearly all of its 700-year existence. But there were strong attempts from the bishopdoms of both Nuremberg and Bamberg to exert influence over the monastery. But they did really kind of resist that and try to be independent, from what I understand. But the first abolition related to the monastery was in the year 1554, when the last abbot died and the abbey was actually taken over by Protestants. But over the next 100 years, several religious changes followed, and the monastery was home to Lutherans, Calvinists and Catholics until it was re-established in 1969 by Ferdinand Maria von Bayern, who was the Bavarian elector. I think he was, I don't know if it's the equivalent of like the Bavarian Premier or something like this of the time. But the construction of the current monastery church began in 1692, and it was then consecrated by the Bamberg bishopdom in 1707. But the monastery was then secularised in 1903 by the Bavarian state, and the monastery church was converted to a parish church, with the municipality of Weissenohe being created in the year 1818. So it went to this parish that had been created a number of years earlier. But the monastery apparently traces its foundation to the year 1058, or the monastery brewery traces its foundation back to the year 1058, and it's been brewing privately since 1803, or has been a private company since 1803, and the brewing rights were acquired by master brewer Friedrich Krause in 1827, and the business has passed down his family line ever since. But today it's managed by Katharina and Urban Winkler, and they employ around 14 people, and their annual output is about 20,000 hectolitres. So that's in the region of 2 million litres of beer per year, if I'm not mistaken. But as of July 2023, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 45 different kinds of beer, according to Untappd, and they do stick to the mainly traditional German styles of beer. But yeah, like I say, a very well respected brewery. They're supposed to do some very, very nice beers, and it is quite cool to be able to feature these guys for you on the channel for the very first time. We've had some really nice Klosterbrauerei beer on the channel over the years. Scheiern is another one that I always enjoyed, and I think we've got another one of their beers to have a little look at on the channel too, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But yeah, that is everything that I can tell you about Klosterbrauerei Weissenohe. And we will need to see about returning to these guys in the future, I guess, as well. If you want to learn more about them, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. But yeah, let's go on and have a little look at the beer itself. So I'll let you have a wee look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. There you can see very traditional Frankonian German type stuff there. There you can see the crest there, and Bonator Doppelbock. You can also see the brewery up there too, the Klosterbrauerei Weissenohe. That is also on the top label, which I'll just tilt a little bit so that the light doesn't reflect off it too badly. And there you can see on the bottle cap Klosterbrauerei Weissenohe, but I think the light is going to make that a bit of a pain to see. But as we mentioned earlier, this one comes in at 8% ABV. It is a Doppelbock, and the Bock styles of beers come from a little town called Einbeck, and the story goes that when the Einbeckers took their beers down to Munich, the Münchners kind of made fun of their accent, and so these beers became known by the Münchners as Bock beers, and that is, Bock was the Bavarian word for goat at the time, and that's why many of the Doppelbocks have a goat on the symbol. But yeah, you can see on the artwork there, it's got that lovely impression of the Weissenohe monastery actually. But yeah, I'll tell you something, when you hold this bottle you can feel the weight of the beer. The Doppelbock is of course the strongest of the Bock beers, and these are lager beers. So remember, the technical definition of a lager is a beer that undergoes fermentation at a lower temperature using a bottom fermenting yeast, usually 8 to 12 degrees Celsius. But yeah, Doppelbock Doppelbock is probably the strongest style of regular lager that you're going to get outside of the Eisbock. But yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass and see how we get on. The Bonator 8% Doppelbock. I'm very, very curious about this. I love my Doppelbocks. Big fan of the kind of more brown sugary styles of beer, Scotch ales, Belgian quadruples, German Doppelbocks, American barley wines, all of these kinds of things. So yeah, definitely cool to be able to review some nice Doppelbocks for you here on Rampant Lion Reviews. I'm going to try and get a nice little bit ahead on this one because, you know, that's what you want with a German beer. You do want a good little bit of head on the thing. I think I might have just overdone this one very slightly, but we'll see how we go. In fact, no, actually, I got it spot on. I thought I'd overdone it, but there you are. So, yeah, you can see that this beer has poured pretty much as you would expect of a Doppelbock, and I have to say it does look very nice, in fact. So before the head starts to recede on this one, you can see that it's poured with that lovely two-finger frothy, I would say very light kind of beige fawn coloured head. You can see some big bubbles at the top of the the liquid there just at the base of the head, but you can see it starts to get a little bit more foamy the further up that you go. But yeah, the head colour, as I say, a lovely kind of fawn, very light beige sort of thing. But in terms of the colour of the beer, this is a lovely kind of dark chestnutty sort of thing, which is what you would expect of the style, of course. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour too, but you don't often have to care about that with Doppelbocks, unless you're talking about some of the special American brewed Doppelbocks, of course. This is an interesting style to play with, of course, if you're a more American style minded craft brewer. But yeah, the colour of this is lovely, lovely dark chestnutty note to it. It's got a good little bit of haze to it, I would say, as well. It's got a lovely little bit of a kind of hazy character to it, and one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass too. You can see one or two little bits of carbonation, a few streams of bubbles just going up toward the bottom of the head there. Overall, it does look pretty nice, and you can see it has a bit of a natural hazy character to it as well. But yeah, a few little bits of sediment floating around in this one. I must have had the fridge just set a little bit low, but yeah, in terms of what you'd expect from a Doppelbock, I don't think there's anything really surprising about the appearance of this beer when we've poured it out. So that's everything we need to say about that. Let's have a wee look at the aroma and just see what this one is going to have in store for us. This could be quite nice. Yeah, I'm going to say this smells absolutely lovely. I'm going to say too that the aroma of this one doesn't kind of jump out of the glass at you, and you do find that a little bit with Doppelbocks. They're not the most pungent of beer styles in terms of their aroma. They tend to be, as they warm up, you get a little bit more out of them, and I've maybe got this one just slightly too cold, but we just need to see when we taste it. We've started the video now, so can't change it. So yeah, it smells really nice though, and it gives you everything you'd expect. You've got that big sweet bready character, a lot of brown sugar because this beer is of course higher in alcohol. You've got a lovely little bit of that noble hoppy note, and you just have you've got quite a little bit of fruitiness out of this one. So yeah, aroma wise, this is absolutely lovely. So let's just try and break the aroma of this beer down and see how it goes. So the backbone of the beer is absolutely what you'd expect. You've got this lovely kind of rye bready, bread crusty character coming out of it. So that sits there. That sits there in the backbone of the beer. You do get a little touch of woodiness out of this one, and this is quite common that you'll get a wee bit of a woody note mixing in with the malt base, but it's not too prominent. So yeah, big rye bready bread crust in this one. A lot of kind of sweet, slightly caramelised rye bread sitting above that in the malt base as well. And then you get a few like sort of nutty and like Christmas puddingy type notes out of the beer as well. And the way that that goes together is quite interesting. So yeah, the way that goes together is really quite nice too. So yeah, rye bread in the base, Above that, as I say, or further forward, you get a wee bit of nuttiness in there, a wee bit of that almost Christmas puddingy sort of thing. But then above that, you start to get like a kind of sweeter pumpernickel type bready note. So yeah, sweeter pumpernickel bread out of this one. And then above that, you have a little bit of, you absolutely have a little bit of kind of more wholemeal brown bready character. And there's a wee touch of nuttiness within that wholemeal brown bready character as well. And then there's a lot of brown sugary character out of the beer too. Yeah, the brown sugary side of things is really quite nice for me, there's a whole host of things. The brown sugars give this beer quite a little bit of complexity. So it's almost like you have a little bit of a leathery kind of brown sugar underneath. Usually when you have leathery brown sugars, it's an indicator of a slightly longer wort boil, and it adds a little bit more complexity to the beer. I don't know how long you boil the wort for when it comes to brewing Doppelbocks. I've never tried to brew one of these actually. But yeah, lovely leathery brown sugars in there. A little bit of a toasty brown sugar above that. And then, yeah, you do start to get a wee bit of a more, as I say, you start to get a little bit of a more kind of sweet caramelly note coming out of the beer too. So it's kind of layered. Yeah, you've got leathery brown sugar, kind of toasty character, bit of an oily caramelly kind of note, and then you also have that wee bit of, you do have that little bit of just toastiness to it as well. It's great. The aroma of this beer is nice. There's a wee touch of biscuity character out of this one too, which I think is great. But to be honest, I think that's everything we can really say about this beer in terms of its the kind of malty side of it. But it smells great. It smells really good. This is going to be a nice one when we taste it. But yeah, on top of that, you have the hoppy side of things, and the hoppy side is again what you kind of expect. So it's got a little touch of earthiness to it for sure. There's a little bit of that, and with Doppelbocks I find you get a little bit more earthiness than some other styles. But it just depends on the hop variety and things like that, and of course the yeast is going to play a role too. So yeah, you've got that little bit of earthiness to this one. There's a wee bit of herbal character, but when you shoe the beer up a little bit, when you excite it a wee bit like that, you get more of the kind of grassy and floral side of the hoppy character coming out of the beer. So it's got quite a nice bright floral character and a little bit of a bright grassiness as well. Not too wet in its green component either, I would say. Really quite bright. I would be curious to know whether the hop they've used in this one is Northern Brewer. That's a very popular hop to use when it comes to German Doppelbocks. I'm not sure whether that's grown in the Hallertau region or the Tettnang region, but yeah, the fruity character that gives in these Doppelbocks is always very, very nice. But many different varieties of German hops these days, they're getting a wee bit more experimental and adventurous with these things too. So yeah, I think that covers everything we need to say about the green component. On the fruity side of the beer, yeah, on the fruity side of the beer, for me it's kind of what you'd expect. I get quite a lot of blackcurrant out of this one. Little bit of there's a little bit of an oily fig to the beer as well. It's got a bit of plum, a bit of prune as well. You know, dried plums, bit of plum, bit of prune, and then you've got a lovely kind of bit of plum, bit of prune, and then you've got a lovely little bit of bit of plum, bit of prune. And then under that you've got a wee touch of, say, yeah, you have got a little touch of kind of what I would call maybe a little bit of date, actually. It's got a little bit of that datey, sultana type note to it, but a good little bit of fig and a bit of blackcurrant kind of coming out of this one as well. So yeah, the way that this beer goes about its business, I think, is really quite nice, and it gets the aroma. It gives you everything you'd expect of the Doppelbock, but I would say that it's a little bit more. It has got a wee bit more breadiness to it than some of the other ones that I've come across in the past. But yeah, I think this is going to be good. As I always say, though, take a wee bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think we should have a taste of this one now and see what it's all about. So yeah, this one is the Bonator, a Doppelbock coming in at 8% ABV. From the Klosterbrauerei Weissenohe in Weissenohe, near in the Forchheim district near Nuremberg in Franconia, in northern Bavaria in Germany. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers, prost. This is pretty damn good, actually. First impression is that it's very smooth, very kind of bready leaning Doppelbock, and it shows you, this is an interesting one, yeah, more kind of bready, yeasty Doppelbock, and it shows you a little bit more of the sweetness later on into the aftertaste. I'm just checking to see, yeah, there wasn't really much in the way of sedimentation in the bottle of this one, so it could just be that this is a slightly more yeasty and bready leaning Doppelbock actually. I'm always worried that my parents' fridge is quite cold actually, so whenever I'm back home in Scotland for a wee bit, I always worry that you seem to get quite a bit of sediment out of some of the beers that I put in there. It just happens. But yeah, for me this is a really smooth, bready Doppelbock, and the sweetness just builds the further into the aftertaste you go. And obviously as the beer warms up, you're going to get more and more sweetness out of it too. So good few things to think about when it comes to this actually. But I'm going to say straight away, very, very nice beer. It's been a while since I've had a German brewed Doppelbock, to be honest with you, but this is a very nice change of pace. But it gives you everything you'd want: the big breadiness, a bit of the cakey character, the dry sweetness, noble hoppy character, a little bit of fruit. It's a very nice example of the style, and that's all you can ask for, to be honest. So let's try and break this beer down then and just describe the flavours that little bit more in depth for you, as we always do. So, for me, let's see, this is really nice. You get more and more sweetness out of this the further into the aftertaste that you go. So, middle third of your palate then. The backbone of this beer, you have that lovely, as I say, you have that lovely kind of smooth backbone out of this one. It's like a kind of rye bready bread crust, a fresh out of the baker rye bready bread crust. It's got quite a little bit of woodiness to it as well. So yeah, rye bready bread crust in there, nice little bit of woodiness. I do think that goes together really quite well. On as you move further forward on that middle third of your palate, you do get a little bit of woodiness coming out of the beer. So yeah, nice little bit of woodiness coming out of it, and yeah, I think the way that goes together is really interesting. Like, you get more and more woodiness out of this beer the further into the aftertaste you go, for sure. But yeah, lovely kind of smooth bread crusty character and a little bit of woodiness. On top of that, you get like a very smooth kind of rye bready character. Then it's very layered, the middle third of your palate, this one. So you get the rye bready character, you get like a sort of pumpernickel-y type bread, and then you get a wholemeal bread. But the bread is really smooth in this one, almost to the point where it feels like slightly cakey, which is really interesting. So yeah, bread crust, rye bread, pumpernickel, wholemeal brown bread, and then above all of that you start to get the kind of brown sugary notes out of the beer, which are really nice. What I would say as well is that the bready characteristics in this beer, they do develop a little bit of nuttiness, which is quite interesting. So yeah, there's a wee touch of nuttiness coming out of this one the further that you go in with it, and yeah, beyond that you get more and more of the woodiness and the nuttiness coming out into the aftertaste with the beer. But yeah, above the wholemeal brown bready layer, you can feel there's this sort of leathery brown sugar. And as I mentioned earlier, usually when you have leathery brown sugar, that's an indicator of a slightly longer wort boil. So you've got a leathery brown sugary layer, a little bit of a toasty brown sugary layer above that. Then in the dead centre of your palate, you have that kind of oily, dry, but slightly sweet caramel, in fact. And the way that goes together, as always, is really nice. So yeah, for me, yeah, the leathery brown sugars linger there, and as I say, layer, so leathery, toasty, sweet caramel. Like in the dead centre of your palate, you get that little circle where you get the sweet caramel, and that's the sort of epicentre of the booze in this beer, to be honest with you. But above all of that, you get a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive, biscuity kind of thing coming out of the beer. So that gets a big thumbs up from me. On the On the middle third of your palate, I don't know if there's really anything else we need to say about that. I think we've covered it all, and that is the most complex part of the beer when it comes to a Doppelbock. So let's move on to the back third of your palate then. But remember, as I've always said, with the back third of the palate, you get similar flavours. They just come out at different intensities and things. But do remember that general trend with your palate that sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back. It's just my experience. But yeah, on that border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there. You can feel some of the kind of rye bready character in the base, the kind of pumpernickel in the middle, and then the wholemeal brown bread on top. That's a wee bit dry at the top. But yeah, the base of that back third of the palate, you've got the bready character, which again feels a little bit drier. On top of that, you have the on top of that, you've got a little bit more of a I would say you get a little bit of the rye bread there, and that feels a little bit taller and more airy. The pumpernickel bread is there, and it feels a little bit more taller and airy. Then there's a little bit of a then there's the wholemeal bread, which feels taller and more airy. Then above all of that, you do have this almost like very smooth, very slightly cakey sort of note coming out of the beer. And then above all of that, you can feel some of the drier aspects of the kind of leathery brown sugar just creeping over the top, which I think is very nice. So yeah, for me, the way that goes together is really interesting. In this particular beer, the way that kind of all just pieces together is really kind of nice. But yeah, I do think it works out pretty well. Like I love how this beer kind of just pieces together. In fact, but above everything else on that back third of the palate, you start to get some of the yeasty notes out of the beer. And for me, the yeasty character in this Doppelbock is quite interesting. It's like a really dense pumpernickel, kind of doughy bready sort of thing. It's got a little bit of woodiness to it, and it's just kind of wrapped in like a really, it's not honeycomb, it's wrapped in a more, there's a bit of honeycomb to it in fairness, but it's wrapped in this really kind of leathery brown sugar. So yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is really very, very nice. But yeah, I think it's, I do like how this one pieces together. So the back third of your palate, you can feel the flavour is taller for sure, and then as you move further forward into the middle third of your palate, it just kind of condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, it's really, really nice how all of that pieces together. Yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of this beer. So on the hoppy side of things, you do have this little bit of on the hoppy side of things. We talk about the green component. In the back corners of the palate, you absolutely get a little bit of earthiness in there. As we move further forward, it's a little touch herbal, and as you push toward the kind of front corners of your palate, you get a nice little bit of floral aromaticity coming out of this one. So yeah, a nice little bit of floral aromaticity for sure, and then round the kind of front curve of your tongue, I think you get a little bit of a nice brighter grassiness. The green component for me, it's very smooth on the sides of your palate, but it's a little bit brighter just around the front part of your tongue. As I say, the floral and grassy notes just giving you that wee bit of brightness. These are very typical things though for the majority of German lagers though. These noble hoppy characters are quite similar. But the earthiness and herbal character is a bit more prominent in the more brown beers like Bocks and Märzens and Dunkels and stuff like that, Alt beers too. So yeah, interesting stuff. Let's look at the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of the beer. So for me, the border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there. Again, you can feel the sort of rye bread in the base, the pumpernickel in the middle, and the kind of wholemeal bread on top. Then the base of that front third of your palate, you've got the nice kind of bread crusty notes. You've got a wee bit of the more, I'd say it's more of the wholemeal and the pumpernickel bread that are there on that front third of your palate. Then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's focus on that fruity side of things. So for me, the fruity side of this beer is really nice, and as I say, as my palate's adjusted to this beer and the kind of bigness of it, the more that I've drank of it, you get more fruitiness out of this one. At the back of that, it's quite a dry fruity character, I would add, as well. And this beer does give you more and more dryness into the aftertaste. And definitely a more bready example of the Doppelbock, as I've mentioned already. So yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a little bit more of a you get a little, I wouldn't go as far as raisins, you get a bit of a kind of oily, juicy plum. Underneath that you have a kind of, underneath that you have a more dry prune. There's a little bit of a kind of datey character in there as well, kind of sultanas, like in the base dates and sultanas, but the red fruit sitting on top. As you move further forward into the middle of that front third of your palate, you've got this kind of oily, peary sort of thing going on. Yeah. So yeah, plum, prune, date, sultana, and the back of that front third of your palate, as you move further forward, oily pear. But when you take the beer in, you've got a little bit more of like a blackberry, black curranty sort of thing going on with this one. I think blackcurrant, for the first part, doesn't really have the sharpness that you might get from blackberries. But yeah, as you move into the front half of that front third of your tongue, it's a lot more about these kind of ready berry fruit type characteristics, and I think that goes together really well in this one, and that gets a big thumbs up from me. So yeah, nice stuff actually. I really do like how this one pieces together from that perspective. Yeah, I think we can. I think the fruity character of this one it's because of the dry nature of the breadiness and so on. I think it's interesting, but yeah, as I say, it gets a big thumbs up from me. I really do like how this beer pieces together from that perspective. Yeah, good stuff. So I think we can leave it at that for the flavour side of things. Let's just round off the review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. As I've said already, this beer, it's one of the more bready examples of the Doppelbock that I can think of, that I've had. Some of them can be really oily, some of them can be more bready, some of them can be quite, dry and leathery. But yeah, for me, I'd say this is pushing top end and mid-bodied. This one almost makes you forget that Doppelbock is a lager rather than an ale, because you can feel it's a very smooth and almost slightly creamy, smooth, slightly creamy, and like a dry, oily type mouthfeel that you get out of this one. The carbonation is very smooth, like I've said. I'd say top end and mid-bodied. In terms of the IBU count in this beer, I think in fairness it's like 20-25 IBUs, which is standard for the style, but you've got a bit of dryness in there which could be conflated with bitterness. The malt base, as we said, dry underneath, smoothness in the middle, and a dry sweetness on top of that. Then the fruity character, kind of red in the beginning, a little bit juicy. Then you get this big oily fruity character just coming out of this one. The further into the aftertaste that you go as well. So yeah, I think the way that this beer goes together is really nice, and it certainly has my approval. I wouldn't hesitate to drink this again, but for me, Doppelbocks are a little bit of a treat because we just don't see them all that often. But yeah, positive review of this one, absolutely. This is worth trying if you enjoy the style for sure, but one of the more bready examples of it, so be prepared for that. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This was the Bonator, I'm not sure how we should pronounce it exactly, an 8% Doppelbock from the Klosterbrauerei Weissenohe in Weissenohe, near in the Forchheim district near Nuremberg in Franconia, Bayern, Germany. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Klosterbrauerei Weissenohe as well. And yeah, hopefully we can look at a few other beers at some point in the future. But until then, thank you for watching. Check out my social media, check out their social media. Try some nice Doppelbocks. Let me know any good Doppelbocks that you like in the comment section below as well, and we'll see about making those happen. But thank you again, and I'll see you soon. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and catch you guys later.